Hello, everyone. Hello and welcome. Cindy Drozda here. I am here for my bi-weekly live stream, and I am here. That wasn't what I wanted. Here's what we want. I am here every 2 weeks, and I will talk about my next one here in a minute. I really want to welcome all of my friends who've showed up today. Thank you so much for being here. This is great. I just love it. David from Oregon, you're warm and sunny, and today we are raining. We've had 3 days of rain. Wow. For this place, that's a lot. And Renee from Washington, a couple of folks from Canada, Dwayne and Trevor, good to see y'all here. And Gail, I see you on Facebook a lot. Great to see you on the live stream here. My good friend Todd Raines with the Wood Turning Tool Store. Nice to see you here. And in this Wood Turning Tool Store, this must be Shelley. I'm not sure who's who in their family, but welcome Shelley and welcome Todd and welcome to everyone who's here. Larry, yeah, good to see you here on the stream. And John, great to have everyone here with me. So yes, please type your comments or your questions for me in the comments on whatever platform you are watching today. And I will try to answer and just say hello to each other and we'll have a little fun here today. So good stuff. All right, so what am I up to today? Well, I'm going to talk about jam chucks and vacuum chucks. Before I get started with that, I would like to go over the wood turning calendar of events. And starting with, here's me, Erie, Colorado. Today it's raining. That's a picture of my shop this morning. 2 days ago, we had a hailstorm, and oh boy, you can't really tell from the picture, but all the lilacs are just shredded, and the trees dropped a bunch of stuff all over everything. Anyway, it was a very dramatic hailstorm. And yeah, I don't know if Oregon, we see that Eugene is overcast. Hard to say about rain though. And like I said a minute ago, I am here on the live stream every 2 weeks. That means my next one will be 2 weeks from today on May 25th, and it's noon Mountain or 1800 UTC. You can get there by subscribing, and let me put in, if you click subscribe on my website, cindydrozda.com, you can get there, and you can also get there by clicking the QR code. Where is it? Or scanning the QR code on your phone if you happen to have a phone and you're watching this on something else. Or go to my website and click the subscribe button. And what I do there is I will send you a direct link to the webinar. You can also just find these live streams by going to my Facebook or YouTube channels at the time and just tuning in. But the direct link is fun. It's good because you can just click on it and there you are. My friend Todd Raines also does a live stream like this. He is also bi-weekly, and his bi-weekly live streams are on alternating weeks to mine and on Fridays at 2:30 p.m. Central, which is 1930 UTC. And so you can see one or the other of us every week, me on Thursday, Todd on Friday. And you can sign up there on his website, Wood Turning Tool Store. Let me put that up here. woodturningtoolstore.com is where you can sign up for his newsletter and get the same kind of direct link to the StreamYard webinar like I was talking about from mine. And Todd's a really busy guy this coming couple of weeks, because Friday, May 19th, he's doing a live stream. And then the very next day, he's doing a live demonstration, IRD. It stands for Interactive Remote Demonstration. And it's code for a wood turning class online where he and the others of us who do these teach you how to do something. And he'll be talking about embellishing turnings with encaustic wax, something I have barely heard of, never seen, and never done. So I'm going to really look forward to learning something. That'll be great. This one is not at his 2:30 Todd slot like he does on Friday. It's at noon Central, 1700 UTC, and this is Saturday, May 20th. So we've also got, where are we? Lyle Jameson, a good friend of ours, who has a live, who does these IRDs. And let me get Lyle's website up. He's going to be doing using a burl for a hollow form, and that's on May 23rd, which I believe is a Tuesday or Wednesday. And he's at 7 p.m. Eastern, which is 11 o'clock in the nighttime in UTC. So yeah, kind of more Western focus there. And Lyle now is offering a recording. So if you've ever been frustrated by not being able to show up for one of Lyle's sessions and you wish you could, well, now you can have a recording. It's great. So congratulations, Lyle, for offering that. We're really happy. And after that, I will be, and Lyle will be, and some of the other vendor showcase folks will be at the AAW, American Association of Woodturners International Symposium in Louisville, Kentucky. I will be in the trade show, so you can find me in the trade show at booth number 125, and I'll look forward to seeing you all there. If you can come to this, it's really fun. But hey, you know what? If you can't make it, now they have an online component for the first time ever. This is, I don't know if this is the first symposium that's offering both an in-person and an online participant experience like this. So yeah, if you can't make it to the actual event, join us online. There will be 1 or 2 rooms that are streaming the demos, and you can find out about it on the AAW's website, which unfortunately I do not have a banner for. So if you want to know about it and you can't find it, email me and I will give you all the details. And I will not really be part of that, except that I'm all excited about it. But you can see me on Todd's regular live stream day. The vendor showcase team is going to be, some of us will be Todd in Texas, and me and Lyle and Joe in Louisville, and Steve Worcester in Texas. Uh-oh, did I freeze? Uh-oh. Looks like I froze. So who's going to AAW? I'd love to hear who's going to be there. And Todd has put a bunch of things in the chat for us, Wood Turning Tool Store. Yes, we're going to live stream from both Texas and at the symposium. We have a ton of fun with that, going around the trade show and interviewing some of the vendors, and hanging out with each other, some of us in person and some of us not. And yes, I found my way back. I have no idea what happened there. Link dropping by Todd is because I cannot put clickable links in the comments, but Todd and I share this account here, so he's dropping some links in there for you that you can actually click on all the platforms. So I think this is good because, you know, I put up these QR codes and things, and you can only really access that if you have a phone. And so this is good. Thank you, Todd. Okay. Trudy and Steve will be there. Yay! Yay! So the online attendance, yes, Valerie, definitely check it out. I don't remember how much it costs, but it costs a lot less than being there in person. Not to mention no flight, no gas, no hotel. All the rest of the costs are not going to be there. And yeah, doing the virtual symposium. This is good. Attending in person is really fun. There's really nothing quite like face to face with everyone. And the trade show is awesome, and you can shop for tools and all kinds of toys like that. That'll be really good. And Todd is going to be online there. So this is great. This is great. This is cool. If I weren't already signed up to be there, I would be online too. All right. So what have we got going on here that's cool stuff? Oh, yes. One more thing is because of AAW, I'm not doing an IRD in May. I'm doing one 3 weeks after AAW on June 24th, which is a Saturday. And I'm going to show you how a couple of approaches to threaded boxes. I still haven't worked out the details yet, and you can't sign up for it yet, but look for that. Right now, my brain is on AAW, so there's where we're going to go. And David, yeah, definitely come to the virtual if you can, but next year it's going to be up in your neck of the woods, and we will actually get to meet in person. So that's the cool thing about the AAW is that they move the symposium to a different place every year. So if you can't make it, if it's too far away and you don't want to drive or fly, then pretty soon it'll be close to you, hopefully. And John's got a question. Thank you very much for asking a question. And anyone else who wants to ask me or somebody else on the stream a question, please do type it in the comments on whatever platform you're watching. Have I done the turned basket weave illusion? Well, sort of. David Nittman used to do that. He was one of the founders of it, and I did some collaborations with him where sometimes I did the basket illusioning part, and then he decorated it, and sometimes he turned it and I decorated it. So it's not really my thing, but I have done it. And here's Lyle. So if you've got any questions for Lyle, yeah, he's here. He's in the chat room there, and he will be on the live stream from the trade show. I think that is June 2nd. Correct me if I'm wrong, Todd, if you want to put the time in the chat there. And yeah, Oregon AAW next year. All of you who are up there in the Pacific Northwest, it's usually really far away to actually go to the symposium, not to mention a couple of time zones away. But next year it's going to be right in your backyard, so that'll be fun. And I look forward to seeing y'all there. All right, so let me get rid of this little distraction here. And I want to start talking about jam chucks and vacuum chucks. So put your questions in the chat for sure, and I'll get them as best I can. If I don't get your question, it might be because there's a lot of comments. Put it in there again, if you would, please. So a jam chuck, just to settle out the terminology here. If I'm doing a box, and we use box kind of loosely in wood turning, if I'm doing a container like this, and I want to put it back on the lathe to finish out the bottom, I'm going to use a jam chuck, which means I'll put a piece of wood in a piece of waste wood in the chuck on the spindle, and then I'll make a tenon that jams the piece on. And that way I don't need to have my tailstock up, and I can do any kind of work I want to over here on the end of the piece. And that is great, except that, uh-oh, I made it too loose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I can combine vacuum chucking with jam chucking. And we'll talk about vacuum chucking here in a second, and get a little more of some of the advantages of both of them. So the advantage to a jam chuck like this is I can take it off, measure the wall thickness, whatever I want to do, put it back on, it's going to spin true again. The disadvantage is that if I made it too loose, well, I do have a strategy that I like, and that's where I'll take a piece of paper. I use a paper towel, kitchen paper on the other side of the ditch there, and I separate it into single ply and put the paper in the fit, and now we have a good fit. Now here's what I call a good jam chuck fit. If I can hold the piece that's jammed on and turn the lathe spindle just by turning the piece, I'm happy. Before I put the paper in there, can't do it. It's too loose. It's just not going to stay on there, even if I did other things. And so here we have a question from John. Do I have a bunch of standard size jam chucks? Oh, that's Dances with Aardvarks, whoever you are. You're dancing with an aardvark today, I see. I usually will cut a jam chuck for each individual piece because jam chucks are sized to the box or vessel or bowl at the moment. They're not really standard sizes. Vacuum chucks, I do have some standard sizes, and I'll talk about that here pretty soon. I'm always wearing glasses, and they are, at the moment, these are, I will show you here. These are Cheaters off the shelf from MSC. They're safety glasses. You can see they've got the wraparound side and top. So these are to protect my eyes. Yes, I need to correct my vision. I am 65 and there's no denying that my vision's not that great. So I do wear all kinds of different prescriptions and things. Could I use hot glue to keep this in place while I turn it? Theoretically, yes. But the problem with that is, let's say I put a bead of hot glue in here all the way around there, and it'll hold it in place. And yeah, you can get hot glue off really easily by watering it with or soaking it with denatured alcohol. But it's going to leave some marks and stains on my piece. And this is already finished and sanded and everything at this point. So I don't really want to do that. But yes, always, thank you very much. I do look a day over 21. You should have seen what I looked like when I was 21. There are always many, many ways to deal with every situation in wood turning. And I'm just going to put you out there a couple of them. But there are other options. Like, for one thing, the option of putting a piece of paper in the fit here was a very good option. So that is a jam chuck where I have jammed the piece on. And somebody made a comment, what flavor of jam is that? But raspberry is my preference. I prefer raspberry jam, and I've actually done some demos on that in the past. Okay, so for a vacuum chuck, I can't use the scroll chuck because the scroll chuck has got too many air gaps between the jaws and things. So what I'm going to do when I talk about vacuum chuck, what I mean is I'm going to use a vacuum pump, and here's a hose coming out of the vacuum pump. It's got a regulator and all kinds of things to show me how much vacuum I get. This device here swivels with the lathe spindle, and this part goes into the lathe spindle. And here's what we do is I'm going to put this into my lathe spindle, and now when the spindle turns, the hose doesn't turn, so it doesn't get all wound up. right? So sometime back, I did a live stream on making my own homemade vacuum chuck. A vacuum chuck can be, I didn't bring over any commercial ones, but most of mine are homemade. You can buy them, but one of the things that can be done is a faceplate on a piece of wood, PVC pipe, and I bought the seal here because it's a little bit better of a seal than you can just get by putting a piece of your own foam on there. But the one I made in the live stream a while back was I just took some foam, some of this craft foam that you can buy. Question about chucks are not universal to every lathe type. Chucks are for your spindle thread. And there are lots of lathes that use there's a handful of standard thread sizes in the world, but not every chuck will fit every lathe. No, they will fit the spindle size that they're intended for. And actually, I know we're digressing, but some chucks, like this Vicmark, this part that's threaded for the spindle size is an insert, and I can unscrew this and put one in for a different lathe spindle size. So some chucks are like that. Some are direct threaded. Hard to say. It varies. The vacuum adapter, I think I got it from Robust. This is a Robust lathe, but it's a fairly standard type of thing. And there are other ways to do it. There's I don't have a link for him, but Bob Leonard at Frugal Vacuum Chuck developed another way to do it. And his friend Douglas, who's doing some really cool stuff in vacuum chucking adapters, he's got some way to do it. It's where you don't have the swivel thing. You do it a little differently with a tube going through the headstock. Anyway, this is just what I have, and I'm not going to talk about vacuum hardware today on the other end of things. I'm just talking about this end. And so here's how the vacuum chuck works. As I thread this on, and we have that adapter in the other end of the headstock, so that if I put something on here like a wood turning, it'll seal up against that foam there and pull a vacuum and hold the piece on. Let's see how well this works, just for fun. I'm turning on my vacuum, and I don't really have much. Oh, I don't have it all the way up to the headstock either. I don't really have much vacuum drawing here at the moment, and that's because I chose a pretty bad example here. This is the piece I made at my last demo, and I was turning it out of wet wood. It's a wing bowl with a natural edge. Turning it out of wet wood, and this wing was flat when I turned it. But look at what we have now. And you can also see that it's narrower on this axis than on this, because it's also gone oval a little bit. And so John brings up a good point. What do you do with an odd shaped piece? Well, lots of things. And sometimes, basically, vacuum does not work. That's the downside of vacuum, is you can't vacuum chuck everything. What if I had little voids or bark pockets or cracks or something in my piece? It's not going to hold a vacuum. So vacuum, well, it's nice sometimes, but it doesn't always work. And sometimes it kind of works. All right, so here's the guy, Frugal Vacuum Chuck, and the other guy is Odd Knot. We'll see him at the trade show. And we get a little bit of a recommendation about Bob Leonard. The bearing is on the chuck end. Yeah, and there's a tube going through your headstock, so you don't have that attachment adapter thing. Have I ever turned a variety of jam chucks on a piece of wood and then cut them into 4 pieces and mounted each piece to coal jaws? Sort of, except not coal jaws. I really haven't used coal jaws before. Coal jaws are big, flat plate jaws that typically have rubber buttons on them. So when you expand your scroll chuck and then tighten it back down, you can grip the rim of a bowl, right? So what I have done for a jam chuck that has some adjustment to it is cut a slot in it and put it in my chuck. So I have a little bit of tightening room. And that's a great subject for another live stream. Cool. Thank you for the idea. So what else have we got here? Here's the guy, odd-not.com. There's a tongue twister. His name is Douglas, and he has some interesting options. Can you jerry rig an odd shape to make it work? Yeah, sometimes, sure. Be creative and let us know how it works. There are so many possibilities for us to do gripping of something. But often an odd-shaped piece doesn't lend itself well to vacuum, nor does something with cracks in it. One thing I do when there's a crack in it is maybe I put a piece of masking tape over the crack, and sometimes that'll seal up well enough if it's not the surface I need to be working on. But, oh, Gail, was that wrong the first time? Odd-not.com. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. So what I'm going to talk about is not so much odd-shaped pieces, but I'm going to talk about some different scenarios. When you got your typical jam chuck or vacuum chuck, you've got a flat surface here around with some sponge foam, and you can get this at hobby shops like Michael's Craft Shop in the US, and I don't know where all else, but it's sold for kids to make craft projects out of, like flowers and things, and it works pretty well. I actually prefer the hard rubber or plastic ones that I get from Rubber Chucky. He's got a bunch of cool stuff. Wait till you check it out. I'm going to show you another one here in a minute. But I like the way this seals better than the way this foam seals. It might be that there's a little more give to it, but the truth about vacuum chucking is that piece I just showed you has a rough surface. If you got a rough surface against a seal like this, the seal has got to have enough give in it to conform to that rough surface. This one is just a thin piece of foam. It doesn't have much give to conform to much of a rough surface, but sometimes it works. It seems to be a little better, but usually vacuum works best when it's a smooth, like sanded hollow form that you're reversing to do the bottom, or like my little box here. I've already sanded it and I just want to reverse it. So what do I think about hot glue? I just mentioned the one thing I don't like about hot glue, and that is when you remove it, it leaves a bit of a stain on the wood. Not terrible, but you have to deal with that then. But it's another way to do things. And I've used hot glue, and the secret to hot glue is that you can get it off really easily by dousing it with alcohol. It softens it right up and you can pull it right off. Otherwise, you'd have to chip it off or heat it up or various stuff like that. And yeah, good to see you here, Roger. Don't forget, you can introduce yourself there in the comments and ask me a question about, hopefully on topic about vacuum chucking or jam chucking. So here is a small piece. And one of the things I want to talk about is vacuum chucking some unusual situations where I'm going to have a jam chuck assisted by vacuum, not strictly a vacuum chuck. So it's going to do both. I'm not going to use this kind of vacuum chuck. Well, okay, so here's one reason why not. This little piece is too small. Let me show you, though, what I could do if I wanted a vacuum and I had a piece that's too small for my vacuum chucks. I have these in a bunch of standard sizes, like PVC pipe sizes, and they will work for various things. Like if I have, if I have a hollow form or a bowl, I can stick the the piece on my vacuum chuck, let me just mention another reason why vacuum chucks are not perfect. I can, if this were a smooth surface, I could stick this on here and vacuum would hold it. But how do I know it's centered? I can move this around all over the place. So what I find with vacuum is that it holds really well, but it's really fiddly to get it centered up. So when I use vacuum, I'm going to need to be putting the piece on the vacuum chuck and never taking it off till I'm done. Whereas if I have a jam chuck like this one, like I said before, if I have a jam chuck, I can take the piece off, put it back on, it'll spin true. I apologize for repeating myself, but I know a lot of people come late, and so I'm just going over it again. So yeah, sorry if you annoyed by that. Okay, in one of my videos, I showed a vacuum chuck with a wide neoprene seal from a symposium, and that would probably be the odd knot thing. I did an interview with Douglas at one of the trade shows, and I think that does help with odd shapes. We're going to have to talk more about that. I really don't have his system, so I haven't tried it much, but yeah, there are lots of options for odd shapes. Sometimes vacuum just isn't it, but sometimes you can get it to work. There are other things besides vacuum. So here's another thing. This is hollow. It's made by Rubber Chucky. Like I said, he's got all kinds of stuff. And it's got a little O-ring right there between the nut and whatever you screw on here. And you can get all kinds of stuff to screw on the end of this, and it goes in your Morse taper headstock. And it's got a hole in the end there, so you can draw a vacuum through it, and you can put little things on here. Or I've got another box I wanted to do. I can put this on there. But again, yeah, okay, I have a tail center, so that makes this work well. But I can't really, it can go anywhere on here. It doesn't automatically center up like a jam chuck does. And here's a good question. Did I add the O-ring? No, Don Doyle is Rubber Chucky, and he makes a million things. And I tried to get one of each. You know, I don't think I have everything even, but some of them don't have an O-ring because he's intending that you just mount some other kind of drive thing, like cup chucks or other things on your headstock without using a vacuum. But he also targets vacuum chucking with some of his devices. And the one with the O-ring is designed to be used like this, where it has the O-ring. So talk to Don. I'm sure he'll set you up. Okay, you've got the odd knot chucks. And yeah, so tell us if it works on odd shaped, weird shaped, non-round pieces, and maybe that'll answer some of the questions there about gripping a non-symmetrical piece. So I'm going to talk about gripping some pieces with both vacuum and jam chuck. So the jam chuck centers it up, the vacuum holds it on, basically. I'll put this guy aside for now, and if I get to it, I might talk about that one. But okay, what else have we got? I want to show you first a vacuum-assisted jam chuck that I did in my demo last Saturday. This is well, let me show you here before I screw it on there. This is a homemade jam chuck vacuum chuck. It's got a faceplate on a piece of wood, and I coated it with shellac just to hopefully seal the pores. And then Oh, my image is frozen? Not on my end. Anybody else seeing a frozen image with no sound? It could be on your end, but let me know if that's what's happening. Not that I can do anything about it. My system, my end shows that I'm streaming, so I'm going to proceed as though I think you can see it and hear it. If not, I will upload the video from the recording I'm doing locally here. Okay, Mike says it's good. Thank you very much. So yeah, your end, that sometimes streams are weird and they just, your internet goes out, StreamYard, YouTube, Facebook has a hiccup or whatever. Thank you very much for the feedback though, folks. All right, so what I've got here is, this is a piece of wood with the grain running this way, so it's like a jam chuck piece, and I made a stub tenon here. I'm going to put this on. It's got a hole through the middle, of course, so that it'll be able to be used for vacuum. And the stub tenon here is sized, it's a taper, and it's sized to fit in the opening of this bowl and jam the bowl on. So it kind of jams the bowl on fairly well, though I really need tailstock support for it. Otherwise, it'll just fall off. It's not jammed on that well. What I have here also is I made the surface of the jam chuck conform to the slight curve that this wing has. And what this does for me is it supports the winged bowl, so I can support the wing while I'm turning it. This is a finished piece, so I'm not actually going to turn this at all. It's done. I just wanted to show you how I held it to do the bottom, which has no tenon or anything. It's just a smooth bottom. So with the hole through it, I now can turn on my vacuum pump. Let's see how well this works. And you can see, if I get myself out of the way here, we're drawing a vacuum. That guy's autofocus is not the best. But yeah, we're drawing a vacuum. So I can now turn this and it's not going to fall off. I might be able to pull it off. Oh, not easily though. Look at that. The wing is flexing before it pulls it off. So I've got about 12 inches of vacuum. That doesn't sound impressive. But when I also have a jam chuck in conjunction with the vacuum, I don't really need as much vacuum to get it to seal. Of course, I also, before I turn this on without the tailstock, I would put some tape across here just to make sure it didn't accidentally fall off for any reason. So that's one way I can do it, is I have a tenon that fits my bowl, and I have the surface here conforming to the wing of the bowl, and I stuck a little piece of that foam on here to make the seal conform, because two pieces of wood don't really seal together very well. Question about my bowl here. What paints did I use? I didn't paint it. This is a piece of dyed stabilized burl that I bought from Mardina Blaney, and it came like this. It was a solid piece that had the color and the resin vacuum impregnated and baked into it, so it was a solid piece. What I usually do though, of course, so that's a good question, is I'll take a piece like this one, and I will turn it and put dye on it. So the dye is only on the surface. That little red piece though, the color goes all the way through the chunk of burl, just in that particular case. I've never used that material before. So, okay, so where we were here, this is one of the options. Oh, good point, John. Could you use double-sided tape? Yes. Now, that answers part of the question of what would I do if I didn't have vacuum? Well, when I did the demo, I actually held the wing bowl, and it was that maple one I just showed you, on a jammed on jam chuck, and I just strapping taped across the wing to get it taped on. And because it had a jam chuck in the middle, it held it well enough to do the very last little bit in the middle. But another thing that I've done is, instead of this foam here, I have put double stick tape on and then put my piece on. And that works really, really well. Two things to think about. Once you double stick it on, you're not taking it off. So make sure you have your wall thickness under control, and make sure that you don't want to do any more work on it except what's on the bottom. And the other thing is getting the double stick tape off again. And it will almost always leave some kind of a residue, either from the solvent you used to get it off or from the sticky goo on the tape. So I find double stick tape best used after I'm done with any penetrating color I plan to use. So in other words, on a bowl like this one, or, well, let's say a bowl where I did the coloring myself like this one, I'm not done coloring this yet or sanding it. So I wouldn't want to double stick tape it on until I was, because I don't want to have to come back with penetrating dye that won't penetrate quite as well into the places where the adhesive was from the double stick tape. But it does work. Okay, and here is a very good point. What do I consider a full vacuum? Okay, here at sea level, full vacuum is 28 inches of mercury. Great. Sea level, I'm at 5,000 feet. The best case I've ever seen around here is like, I thought it was 24 anyhow, not 28, but whatever. I'm never going to get a full sea level vacuum here in my shop unless I pressurize my my cabin, so to speak. Ain't going to happen. A lot of factors enter into how much vacuum is your system going to draw. There are going to be leaks everywhere in the system. That fixture that you put through the headstock, the foam. Oh, a big one is the wood. Quite often, I'm using a porous wood like maple burl. Air sucks right through it. So a better question might be, what do I consider sufficient vacuum? And what I'm trying to say here with this vacuum assisted jam chuck is that I can, if I use partial jam chucking, get away with holding a piece without drawing as much vacuum. So that 12 inches that I had, 12 inches of mercury vacuum on that red bowl on this jam chuck would have been fine, because I've got jam to hold it and I've got tape holding it on. And I'm only going to work on the very smallest bit of the center diameter. Another good question. Dry wood and wet wood may make a difference. Smooth wood makes even more of a difference. Wet wood, sometimes it sucks the water out. Oh, and putting dye on a piece that's held on a vacuum chuck, the dye gets sucked through the piece. Maybe you like that. Maybe you don't like that. So there are things to think about. Vacuum isn't perfect. Do I ever use a veneer press as a vacuum pump? The same vacuum pump that you use on your veneer press can be used on your lathe for a vacuum pump. There are different kinds of vacuum pump. I'm not going to get into that because I don't really know a whole lot about it, but the pump I'm using is the same kind of, I bought a spare one of the same pump, and I bought it from a guy who was doing vacuum bag veneering, not veneering, fiberglass on plastic airplanes. Okay, can I put wet wood tape on the mating surface of the bowl? Boy, I might be learning something here. Never heard of wet wood tape. Yeah, let me know. what that is. Masking tape on the mating surface of the bowl. I have tried that. Masking tape helps a little bit with the seal from wood to wood, but not enough. Double stick tape is thicker and squishy, kinda, and it makes a better vacuum seal enhancer. If there are gaps between pieces of tape, going to lose some vacuum. Foam seems to be the best. I've also sometimes used a paper towel or a couple layers of paper towel. So yeah, there are other ways to do it to get a seal. Try some different things. I tried a few things a couple weeks ago. 4 mil plastic bags. No. Masking tape, not good enough. Although masking tape does help to keep the wood from getting marked by the pressure against your jam chuck. You know, I really wanted to show you something, and I'm going to get working on it because I'm getting all distracted off on these things. What I want to show you is I have done a lot with small boxes, like, for instance, this little one. And here's another. This is a box. I've done the lid already. You know, the way I do this is I'll put it in the chuck and I'll part off the bottom, do the inside of the lid, put the bottom of the box in the chuck, jam fit the lid on, finish the top of the lid. And then now to do the bottom of the box, I'm going to have to reverse it. And usually I'll use a jam chuck for this. And I want to show you how I can have a little more forgiveness with my jam chuck by using vacuum assist. And we're going to do 2 of them. Silicone tape. Well, I never heard of it, but it sounds very interesting possibility. I need to find out more about silicone tape. And if it has a little thickness to it, it's probably perfect. Again, gaps between pieces of tape are not your friend, so you'll have to overlap them, cut through both pieces, something like that to make there be no gap. Masking tape and super glue. I have never heard of this trick. Masking tape and super glue. Super glue on the faces of the tape. I get it. So you put masking tape on both surfaces. You super glue the pieces of masking tape together, thereby holding the piece on. That sounds like a neat trick. Yeah. Sounds like a really neat trick. And then you have to remove the masking tape from both parts later. But yeah, that sounds like it would be a great way to hold a piece on. I'm going to have to try that one. What I'm trying today, however, is I'm going to make a traditional jam chuck for this piece. I'll set my tool rest here. Let's just do that here. I'm going to set my tool rest approximately 1/4 inch, 6 millimeters below center, which is a good place to start. And I am going to jam fit. We're going to go first with the little box. I'm going to jam fit this little box onto a tenon on my waste block. Now, this waste block is not just a waste block in a chuck like I showed before. This one has the faceplate glued on. I put a little bit of RTV silicone gasket sealer between the faceplate and the piece of wood just because this faceplate's not perfectly. You can kind of see there's a bigger gap. And then I put some CA around there too to make sure there was a good seal between the faceplate and the piece of wood. I probably should have sealed the surface of the wood also just to, you know, maximize how much vacuum I get. Like I was talking about, little losses in vacuum throughout the whole chain. Yeah, if you've got a bad seal right here, you're going to lose vacuum. If you've got a bad seal back here, you're going to lose vacuum. You might lose some vacuum through your hose from the pump to the spindle. You might lose some vacuum through the pores of the wood here. That's why we usually use PVC instead of a piece of wood for a vacuum chuck. And this vacuum chuck has got a hole drilled through it so that the vacuum can draw through that hole and hold my piece on it's going to go on like this, but I'm going to put it on a tenon because, yeah, I could just put it right here, but how am I going to center it up? Not so easy. Okay, Gary's got a question here. Foam, art foam, that is the stuff. That is the stuff that I use on the vacuum chuck. 2 millimeters, or actually, I think it's less than 2. I think it's like 1.5. The thinner, the better. And you can get it at art stores, hobby stores. That's good stuff. But it's not as good on the end of the, I don't think, vacuum chuck as the rubber seal. So let's see. Here's a piece of that foam. It's, I don't have a way to precisely measure, but it's something like 1/16 of an inch, which is 1.5 millimeters, maybe 2 millimeters, something like that. And that works really well. I got some thinner foam sometimes, just scavenging stuff. So, okay, so here we are now, and I'm going to just make a quick tenon to fit this bowl. And I'll start with caliper the opening, lock the caliper, and I'm going to transfer. Okay, so good question about the diameter of the hole. Does it matter? There's a guy in our club named John Geem who has done some articles in the AAW magazine and such about, where do I want to go? I want to go here. Why are we not working? All right. Is vMix frozen again for me? No, there we are. John had some philosophy on what size the hole is, makes a difference. I really don't know. So you're asking the wrong person. I just drilled a hole. So I'm going to turn my lathe on, and I'm going to scribe on the face of this block with the point of the caliper closest to me, and I'll just make a line, and then I'll make another line that lines up. So if I were to touch both caliper points to the wood, where is it? Right here. I would get both of them in the same groove. It's not real accurate there, but that just gives me a place to aim for. And now I'm going to go over here and use my parting tool with a peeling cut down to close to the line, and then raise the handle, turn the tool into a scraper, scrape a taper. Yeah, let's go here. I scraped the tapered tenon on there, and I'm hoping that tapered tenon will fit my bowl. It doesn't, so we'll make a really much more taper, smaller taper tenon. What I'd like to see is the bowl go on here, and so it almost goes on. We'll straighten out the taper on the tenon and take a little more off. And we're sneaking up. And Steve makes a good point here, or asks a good question. Sorry you have to leave, but this is recorded. So go back to wherever you're watching it, and you can find the recording of this today with all the questions and all the stuff in it. So that's getting pretty close. And we'll just take it down a bit more here. I'm trying to make a parallel cylindrical tenon to fit my cylindrical opening. And okay, there we are. But oh, it's too loose. Remember I said my criterion for good jam fit is if I can hold on to the piece and I can turn the spindle with the bowl. It's not happening. So I'm going to make my vacuum better by taking this surface down right here. It's not smooth. So I want it to be smooth, and I'm going to smooth that out, because that is actually the place where the vacuum, I'm just using a negative rake scraper here. The vacuum is going to try to seal the end of that tenon to the bottom of the recess here. But I do want to deburr the corner just a touch so it's not all fuzzed up. And so, not good. Let's turn on our vacuum and let's see what we got here. Go ahead, focus. So we've got, if this guy's autofocus would work, we've got about 11 inches of vacuum. And check it out. Now we have met our criteria for vacuum chuck. Now I have confidence. And I also have the ability to take this off, check my wall thickness. Wall thickness, let's just do that. So if I wasn't sure what I had in the bottom of my bowl, I can check my wall thickness. I can put it back on again, and I can turn my vacuum on, and there I have it. So that is what I mean by vacuum assisted jam chuck. The vacuum is making the jam chuck seal better. And I still have all the advantages of a jam chuck, meaning that I can take it off and put it back on again, and it'll spin true again. The vacuum isn't going to seal perfectly in every case, and I did not get what you might call a full vacuum. And how can we tell what's full in this environment? Let's go. I'm going to put my fingers over it, and we'll see what vacuum pump says. My fingers are really not quite big enough. Now, so I usually get something like 20 or 21, but I only got 11 out of this piece on its vacuum assisted jam chuck, and that was enough. So here's another one I can do. And this is a difficult scenario. Okay, question about this process here. Jam chucking is typically used for the end of a project, for the last bit where you want to take away the tailstock and finish off the bottom of something usually, or do some sanding without having the tailstock in place. It is not conducive to large bulk fast removal of material. So it's not ideal for the beginning of a project. That wouldn't be why someone would use vacuum or a jam chuck typically. If I wanted to start a piece on a waste block, I'm going to use what we would call a glue block probably, and glue the piece on and then plan on parting it off and then reverse chucking it on a jam chuck. So really, a jam chuck or a vacuum chuck is not intended for large bulk removal of rough pieces. Vacuum chuck problem, porous wood. Yup, cracks, voids, burrow holes, bug holes, you name it. I find with a lot of my pieces, since I like natural edges and I like little voids and I like to use thin walls on porous material, vacuum often doesn't work very well for me. But I can get, if I have a partial jam chuck, then I can use vacuum to just assist it. and not rely totally on vacuum. So what else do we have for questions here? Maximum RPM that should not be exceeded using a vacuum chuck. There probably is a number about that, but I'm not sure what the scientific solution is. I would say, in general, though, I'm not going to feel comfortable running the lathe spindle at as high of a speed with a piece just held on by vacuum. But the other thing I'm going to do is I'm always going to tape on my piece to the vacuum chuck before I take away the tailstock. Even with this little piece, I'm going to put some masking tape across to hold it on, just because, well, what if the power failed suddenly and I had a big spinning piece like this one on there, and it suddenly, it was on here like this, and it suddenly went spinning off at me with this rough natural edge like a saw blade. No, I wouldn't want that. So I will always tape on. I try to tape things on when I take away the tailstock, whether I've got vacuum or jam chuck or whatever it is. So what else have we got in here? Have I used it on large diameter pieces? Yes. Ditto about tape. Ditto about trying to jam it if possible somehow. And yeah, you can also, if you have really thin walled pieces, you can actually collapse the wood piece with too much vacuum. So that's why most people's vacuum systems have a regulator or a valve that you can bleed some of the vacuum in case you just want a little bit and your system is really tight and it draws too much. And what is this an answer to? Something about probably too much leakage. And okay, Ben, you have a question here. Oh yeah, the wood has too many pores. So you could maybe get a higher CFM pump, but my feeling is that sometimes vacuum just doesn't work, and sometimes a high CFM pump costs too much. Oh, and that's what Ben had to say. Yes, they cost a lot. Most of us are too frugal for that. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for all the comments. I love it, and I'm sharing them all with you because if you made a comment on YouTube, the folks that are on Facebook or StreamYard might not see it unless I put it up there. All right, so next scenario. This is a difficult jam chucking to do. I'm going to jam chuck the tenon into a recess. And making a recess to fit a tenon is not so easy. It's easy to make a recess. It's easy to make a recess with a parallel wall. It's not as easy to make a recess that fits something. So I'm going to start with the same process I did before, where I will use my caliper to measure the tenon and lock the caliper and scribe on the end of the piece using the point of the caliper closest to me, and never touching the far point to the work, but holding it real close so I can kind of see. And here's the groove I'm looking at. So I can see that if I did touch the far point to the work, both points would be in the groove on the diameter line. Okay, so now I've got that, and I'm going to make a recess. I'll start with just removing some bulk here. And so John's got a comment about full vacuum 28 at sea level. Yes, you can get more vacuum down at the bottom of the ocean, and good luck with that. So let us know how that goes. John is the resident comedian here, and he is always good with some advice. What do they call that? Mostly useless advice, but fun. All right, so I'm going to just take down some wood here, almost out to the line. And then I'm going to get my recess cutter, which I don't have. I got to run and get one. Got a recess cutter over here. I've got a lot of things I could use to make a recess, and I'm going to just use the one I like best, which is this square recess cutter. This has got a cutting edge that's parallel to the edge of the tool, parallel to this edge. So if I hold the tool on the rest, and I'm going to bring my tool rest back a little bit to fully support the tool. If I put the tool on the rest and I'm looking down here, don't look at away from your tool. Looking down here, and I'm lining it up parallel to the bed of the lathe, and that'll make a parallel sided recess. I'll just push in, holding the tool parallel to the bed, and I'll go in, cutting with the side cutting edge there, and let's check it. What I'm going to talk about here is if you have a hard time making a recess to fit a tenon, maybe you don't have a tool like this, which is cutting on the side of the tool and cutting with the burr that's raised from sharpening. If you don't have a tool like that, or you just don't have a lot of confidence making a recess to fit a tenon, then if you use a vacuum chuck instead, you have a little more forgiveness with that. I'm sneaking up on that. I heard of wooden chuck jaws. I have heard of people making wooden jaws, and some chuck manufacturers, I believe Axminster is one of them, will offer basically steel jaws because you want the scroll to be matched with steel. Okay, so that's, oh boy, not good. Let's maximize our vacuuming ability here and see if we can get a good seal. I'm going to take a double beveled negative rake scraper, and this one looks like a skew. You can actually use a skew for this, or any number of negative rake scrapers, and I'm going to scrape just to make the surface smooth. I might not need to have foam here, but foam might help. I'm hoping not to have to use any foam. I can either seal the shoulder against the face, or I can seal the end of the tenon against the bottom of the recess. I'm set up with the recess deeper than the length of the tenon, so I'm hoping I can get it to go here. So it's a close fit. It doesn't rattle, but it doesn't grip well enough. And we'll turn on our vacuum pump, and we don't have a lot of vacuum here. We've got looks like, gotta get me out of the way here. We've got about 9 inches of vacuum. So that's not impressive, but it's good enough. It took my jam chuck from unusable to good enough. And you see when I turn the pump off, it's too loose. So what I wanted to explain here was how I can use a vacuum and a jam chuck by creating a vacuum chuck that I'll work on. It's out of wood, so I can make a custom jam chuck for each individual piece, like I did here or here for that red bowl, where I supported on the bowl with a little tenon, and I have the face of the chuck matched to the wing and a little foam in there. I can use this where I get the best of both worlds. I get both the centering ability of a jam chuck and the extra gripping of vacuum. And it doesn't take much vacuum to give a good enough seal to work on just the very center of a piece once I already have it jammed on there, taped on as well. So, okay. Yes, indeed. The other thing to do is that I often will take a single ply of paper towel or any kind of tissue or various things, and I will use that to tighten up the fit. And did that do it? Yeah, that did it. And that's what I usually do. I only use vacuum assist when I have a special case like that wing bowl where my jam chucking was really just going to locate it so that it would center up, but it wasn't actually going to grip it that well. The problem with using a tissue in here is that this is in the way. If I'm planning to do finishing on the lathe here, maybe not on this particular piece because it doesn't lend itself that well to that. Oh yeah, it does. Oh, I could turn down a shoulder here. And anyway, the tissue can be in the way. And sometimes it's not enough. So this is just another option. And another thing that this does is little things don't always vacuum chuck all that well because vacuum grips best with surface square inches or square millimeters of contact. So a small diameter piece doesn't have very much surface to grip with vacuum. Ditto for jam chucks, though. Tiny jam chucks don't hold nearly as well as larger ones, diameter-wise, I mean. So I get a little bit of both by allowing myself to use the vacuum assist here on a small piece. Now, sometimes you want to reverse a small piece, and it's a real drag to center it up on a vacuum chuck. And also, you don't get much hold from a small piece. So, yeah. And this is exactly what we're talking about. We're improving the efficiency of a jam chuck with vacuum. At the same time, we are improving the centering accuracy of vacuum with a jam chuck. And here's something that you hear a lot about refining or adjusting the fit of a jam chuck. Wet the fibers of the wood and they'll swell up and grip better and fill the gap when your jam chuck was too loose. Okay, but not if you live in a really dry climate, because it's going to dry out right away, and in the middle of your turning, when you're relying on it, it's going to let go. So I learned a long time ago not to rely on wetting the fit to make my jam chuck better. So could I use a paper shim if I punch a hole in the middle? Yes, I could, and I have. And sometimes I use a piece of paper in a vacuum chuck situation, not because it helps the seal, but because what it does is it keeps, if I'm using if I'm using wood like this maple, it's pretty soft, and a harder or even the same kind of wood pressed up against it in a jam chuck situation can dent the already perfectly sanded surface, which I don't want. So often I will use a piece of paper towel as a more of a barrier than a vacuum enhancer. And so, yeah, and I'll punch a hole in it so the vacuum will get through. Good point. Thank you. Watering the grain of the wood, yes. Like I just said, I don't rely on it in my climate, but other people like that idea. It's called the tongue oil method, TONGUE. And usually what they say is to spit on it and it'll tighten it up. Could I use an O-ring on the tenon rather than foam? Oh, you mean something like with this one I have here. Let's get the comment off for now. If I had an O-ring that would stretch to go around this tenon and I put it up against here, yeah, I definitely like that idea, because that would act just like the O-ring in this little jam chuck device, where it seals between the shoulder and the jam chuck. Yeah, good idea. And rubber mates for dishes. Rubber mates for dishes. I don't really know what that is, but maybe it would work. Try it and let us know how it goes. This is what I really love about sessions like this one, is that I put out a couple of ideas and then all of you put a lot of ideas in addition. And of course, there are a million ways to do things, and I really haven't tried them all, but I'm always open for suggestions. So yeah, this is a great thing that woodturners will share their methods in this way. You can resize O-rings using CA glue? You're going to have to tell us how that works. I wouldn't have thought. Anyway, I am going to end the session here today. I usually try to keep it at about an hour. We're a little bit over time today, but we had a lot of really great questions and suggestions. And I thank you so much for all of your participation. This is the greatest thing, to have people sharing their suggestions, and a good subject here today, holding pieces on the lathe to do the last bit of the bottom. The O-ring on wood, and it tends to be difficult to run. Perfectly true. Oh, but maybe if you have a jam chuck, it would help. I don't know, but yeah, that might be something, that it just doesn't center up real well. Hard to say. Gaskets out of thin cardboard. Maybe. I tried it, didn't work for me, but might try it, might work for you. It just didn't seem to have enough give, and I think it's too porous. But try some stuff like that. Try some things that you think might have a little bit of compression and not too much, so because you don't want to use like 1/2 inch foam. It just would be too squishy. And like Ben said, the O-ring didn't center up well. Well, neither does thick foam, even like a 1/4 inch foam. I don't think it seals up very well. The one-way vacuum chucks, they come with this great big squishy rubber seal, and I don't really care for it that much, because it also doesn't solidly connect your piece with the lathe. So you get more vibration and more out of roundness when you're trying to turn. So yeah, okay. So here's a suggestion about O-rings. And depending on where you try to use the O-ring, yeah, I've done this too. I've used an O-ring around the stopper for a little tiny vial that I made. And yeah, okay, O-ring cardstock. Yeah, this would be like for gaskets, like the the head gasket on your car is not very squishy. That's a good suggestion. It might work. What I used that didn't work so well was like the backing of a notepad. But yeah, let's try some different things. And even after this stream is done, it'll be up on Facebook and YouTube and StreamYard, and you can still enter your comments and other people will see them. Yoga mats, I have used it, and some of them are thin enough to be good. The thinnest and best one was something that it's like just really thin rubber, and that worked pretty well. I use it for sanding pads too. And so, yeah, that could work. It's just got to be somewhat give and somewhat stiff at the same time, enough to form a transition seal between the surface of the wood on the one side of your piece and the surface of the wood or whatever you have on your vacuum chuck. Okay, folks, well, I'm going to call it a day, and I can't thank you enough for all being here. I hope to see you in 2 weeks, and I hope to see you at the AAW Symposium in about 3 weeks. And then in approximately 6 weeks, I'll be doing another online demo, so watch for that. If you want to find out about all of my stuff, click the subscribe button on my website or do the QR code here. And I will be sending out announcements of upcoming stuff, including upcoming live streams 2 weeks from today. You can find me again right here. So thank you all very much. I'll just stick my website up there one more time. This is me. You can always find me online. Google is good too. Okay. Good night, folks. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whatever it is for you. I'll hope to catch you next time. Bye, all.